So we have a number of people with different interests that went to the show, and I'm just going to start at the left and just let you introduce yourself, so if you will. And by the way, your mics are off. You have to turn them on, wait for the green light.
Good evening. I'm Roger Franklin with Crystal. Glad to be back this year. Last year talked a lot about metadata. This year will be something slightly different, but somewhat related.
I'm Bob Baker, Director of Transport Engineering for Turner Broadcasting, CNN.
I'm Steve McCormick. I'm with CTG.
I'm Mark Fehlig. I attended my 40th NAB this year, and I'm going to talk about all things RF spectrum and the FCC, which was the excitement out there.
RF still exists? I wasn't sure.
Nick Anderson, Digital Glue Post-Production Specialist.
I'm Michael Cardillo. I'm an independent audio post sound designer.
I'm John Davies. It's CNN operations. I have the studio departments and the audio departments underneath me.
And I'm Scott Corley. I manage the master control department at CNN.
I think one of the great things is to have operations, because as engineers we tend to see something and think it's the greatest thing because we look at the technology and it's wonderful. And we come back and say, we have to buy this because it's fantastic. And then operations comes and tells us, no, we have no use for it. So it's great to get that point of view. It never happens. We were actually talking about a product earlier where engineers found it and they brought it to operations who fell in love with it and helped develop it. So let's start the discussion. I'm going to start, and I'm going to just go from this side to the other side. You were at NEB. What did you think, Steve? What was the
Well,
stuff out there?
I mean, you touched on the first point is there's a lot of 4K, but I don't think the gentlemen and ladies in this room are going to be broadcasting 4K anytime very soon. And as
You brought some pictures. So we're going to try and get them.
right, I have a couple slides. And as we bring that up, 4K was everywhere, but that's the really interesting thing that I saw was the high dynamic range. There are a couple demos there, and HDR in 2K looks really, really good. And the nice thing is it gives TV manufacturers a reason to sell TVs this Christmas. So thanks for that. Go ahead and go to the next one. So, whoops, back up one. So apart from the high dynamic range, if you haven't seen that yet, I mean you can actually see the blacks and the brightness and what really looks good. And the great thing is a lot of the information to display those different shades are already in the picture. They're already in the data. We just need to get better TVs to show it. Now, Ericsson had a $30,000 TV. I'm not buying that one for Christmas. But if there are some others that come out, it might be a good option, and the data gets sent along. I touched on metadata, and one of the ways we're seeing metadata used a lot is in audio watermarking. Talked to some gentlemen that are working through SMPTE on an open ID standard to develop a new watermark for identifying content. And it'll be interesting to see where that evolves to. And there were a number of folks looking at audio fingerprinting to look for illegal copies of content, try to use that to identify content and understand where commercials are, what commercials are being played, when and where. And of course that leads into the next one is the web streaming, and especially the ad replacement, content replacement for web streaming. A lot of companies doing that. I think both in the audio processing and web streaming, we're going to see some consolidation events over the next few years because there are a lot of smaller companies doing simple or doing independent products and services in those areas. But it's definitely taking off.
I'm going to give a plug. You talked about HDR being a big thing. We're working at SMPTE to bring Matthew Goldman in for August to do a presentation on HDR.
Wonderful.
So,
good.
That's a plug for our future presentation.
Excellent. One last thing. In the NAB labs, which I understand is where some new and interesting things are coming out, so there's a company working on spiral modulation in the RF world. They have some patents, but they're not quite sure they can actually build it. And if they do, they don't know if it's going to be as efficient as they think. The other thing I saw there was 3D TV. I think it's going to stay there, but I'm not kidding. They instead of having a fixed iris on the camera, they had a rotating iris, and it was really hard to watch because it looked like the picture kind of moved around a little bit. But it did give, if you didn't pay that close attention, you got an effect that looked more three-dimensional than a flat picture.
Isn't that what they did originally for scanning for TV? They had a wheel.
Color wheel.
The first one was black and white. Had glasses.
Yeah, it's the CBS color wheel. That was their format.
Yep. So that was there. I didn't pay much attention though.
Bob, I know you've got a couple 1,000 pictures.
So Rick, start the timer. So I've got some pictures. I just showing some highlight pictures here. So it was a great show, really fun. I walked 26 miles this year. So Rick, so
That says it all, 26 miles.
so you're always so mean. Okay, so Roger already talked about 4K, talking about technologies. Yeah, a lot of 4K. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit later is a company called TECO, which is showing 4K that's compressed and over into a 3G circuit, which I'll talk about that in a minute. But HEVC, a lot of HEVC, even like little companies like DTEC out of Paris. They used to be OptiBase, they bought them, but they had just a small little tiny encoder, and they were doing HEVC. The one thing about HEVC is you'll find is that most of it, a lot of it last year was software encoding. This year it's software and FPGA encoding, and there's still no hardware. Rick, you didn't see any, did you? There's still no ASIC chips yet, but they're coming. So they keep saying they're coming. So, but there was a lot of improvements in that area. I think I saw there was a lot of companies showing HEVC real-time encoding. And one thing I mentioned about that is, the original plan was to have a 50% improvement, and they're close to 50%. The other thing is I mentioned before was 1080i is interlace it was not really designed for interlace. Interlace is still an issue. Right now, most of the vendors were telling us that they're at about a 35% improvement with 1080i. So that's something, but most of the stuff we were seeing was 50% efficiencies, and then also, of course, that's the big thing for 4K, right? So, and you saw rates all over the place, anywhere from yeah, I know I'm going with like anywhere from, I would say, I don't know what Rick saw, but like 15 megabits up to, well, some people were even showing as high as 60. So, but anyways, but the average I would say was about 17. That's what we've been kind of shooting. That's what most people have been shooting for, is about 17 megabits with 4K. The other thing was lots of drones. There literally was a whole section of the floor this year on drones. Didn't know that many people made them. It was crazy. But anyways, I'll show you a picture in a minute. So this is a picture. We'll go through these pictures real quick. But this was Fabrics. Fabrics has a wait one second. But that was a 4K rasterizer. Then the next picture you can go to is the handheld unit. We've got some of these handheld units, and they were pretty pricey, but so they've come out with a new low-cost unit, which is about $3,000. So these are really neat. The one thing that's a little frustrating with these, if you ever use Fabrics, is that with anything new like this, is it runs on Linux, and it takes a while to boot. So the old days of turning on the old Tektronix WFM90, right, you had an instant waveform, and which is great if you ever do remotes with sports with trucks, you know what I mean? And I know Dick does, but you need a picture immediately, and these things you can't do that. And there's no sleep mode, by the way, like on the Tektronix handheld. So that's something. Okay, next one. This was really cool. This was a rasterizer that has 4 cards in it, and so you can do 1 to 4 channels. I thought this was really neat because you're seeing 4 full-blown HD rasterizers at the same time in a multi-view picture. So you see the pictures at the top, you see the eye patterns, you see the waveform. You can do vector, audio, everything. Dolby E, Dolby AC3, you name it. This was a really nice, powerful unit. So the next thing is I want to mention is Hamlet. This is not Hamlet, but I'll get to a second. But Hamlet came out with a new handheld unit. I know a lot of people here work with transport streams like we do, and Pixelmetrics went under. So anyway, so they have a handheld unit. I saw it at IBC, talked about it last year. We bought a couple, had a few issues. They're fixing them. But anyways, they're getting the over-the-top part of it to work, but it's an ASI IP handheld, and that's really, really neat. It's called the Enterprise. So that's that. What you're seeing here is the Teradek. If you guys are familiar with, you heard about Teradek, they've really made a really big boom at the show as far as wireless video. And I know a lot of churches are using them. Now, just so you know, CNN is using Link and other companies that cost $80,000. You know, a lot of churches and schools can't afford that. So anyway, so these units are, you know, $2,000 to $4,000 for the set. Anyway, so they're really, really cool. What you're seeing here is an H.264 encoder that's used for live streaming. And this thing is literally, you know, as big as, you know, like an iPhone 6, you know, 6 Plus. So it's very, very small. And you put in your video, put in the IP address, and you're streaming live. So that's pretty cool. The next thing, Nevion, I was going to mention is it's coming up here, but there's Nevion is one of the things they do is a really cool, clean ASI switch, an IP switch, and so we're using those at CNN, and we've met and talked to them a long time, and they had a lot of new, really neat products. The other one that I don't have a picture of is that I don't know if you guys saw it before, but it's a router with a detachable front panel. And so you literally can replace, the router will stay running, fully running, and you pull the whole front panel off and you can swap it out if it has a problem. And it just snaps on magnetically. So that was really, really neat. What you're seeing here is GD Satcom. We were out looking for SSPAs. I'm sure, I don't know if Mark knows, he used to work for him, but Wavestream no longer makes C-band transmitters. So anyway, so we actually need some solid-state transmitters up at HBO, and so we were out looking at SSPAs, and this was one of the companies we looked at. They're right here in Duluth. But anyway, so we talked to them, and one of the neat things is about them was two things, is that, and they're not the only ones doing this, but is that, you know, with all the modules and everything, like I know a lot of people have been doing over the air for a long time, but for satellite, you know, you can just pull out a module, plug it in, you know, and you lose a couple dB, you know, plug it back in, plug in the fan assembly, pull the power supply, replace power supplies, all that stuff, and the whole thing is running the whole time. So anyway, so that's something that, and what we're looking up at HBO is that maybe we don't need full one-for-one redundancy that way, right? And that's something that in Turner, you know, we always do one-for-one on everything. Everything has two of everything. So this is a situation where, like, okay, maybe in this situation, this is a backup for HBO in case we lose the city of Atlanta. So maybe we don't need to have, you know, spend that much money on it. So that was kind of cool. All right, next picture. TAG. Is a multi-view company out of Israel. I've been looking at them a couple years, and this is pretty cool multi-viewer. They just keep getting more and more powerful. So Evertz does this. I have several Evertz units. Miranda, Grass Valley does it, and Imagine does it. A bunch of companies do it. But the big thing is, you know, how many SDs can you do at a time? How many HDs can you do at a time? But they're doing, you know, the full metering, the full closed caption, you know, everything. And then you can, this also streams to your phone, by the way. It's built into the system. And you can pull up this full multi-viewer, you know, full frames and see it, which was really, really neat. They're a neat company. Next one, Evertz. So, you know, Evertz is a huge booth. There's a lot to see. But anyways, but one of the things I just want to mention is some guys were talking about earlier before the conference here, but was the View system. This is a very, very powerful touchscreen system that does everything. You know, you can do 8 live videos, adjust all the proc amps. You can see your rasterizers, everything. And so CNN has been using this for a good while. They've helped Evertz make the software tailored to us. And I just purchased one for our compression area. We're going to buy a couple more. And it's a very, very powerful system. What's neat about it is for us is that we have 80 networks times, you know, 4 different videos at 2 locations. So that's, you know, about 400 videos. You add them all up to look at between the 2 locations, and you can do all that just by touching the screen. So it's going to build an 8-way multi-viewer for every single network we have in a second. It just commands the router and does it. So that was pretty neat. They were showing a lot of new products and, you know, fiber and everything else. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Imagine, of course, one thing I was mentioning here is, you know, everybody was showing their new IP routers. You know, the big deal is, you know, most of the companies on the floor were standards-based and, you know, and SMPTE 2022, and that, you know, you're going to go through any router and all this kind of stuff. And then there's Evertz that does it their way. So it's kind of, you know, it's pretty, I don't know, I think it's kind of controversial right now which way we're going. But anyways, but Grass Valley, you know, they had their system. This was Imagine, and they had their IP routing. And then you had Snell, Quantel Snell, which, by the way, Snell, I got a picture of. They were showing switching live through a Nexus router with all their panels and everything. It was really, really neat. Next picture is, and also Imagine was showing their HVAC encoding. I mentioned that before, and then a Versio play out on the cloud. Thomson, this is the Sapphire. We looked at the Sapphire 1 and 2. Go back one real quick. But anyways, this was the Thomson multi-view system, and we looked at their Sapphire. Very impressed with it. So if you get a chance, it's kind of neat. ASI, IP recorder, delay server, playback, everything else. The new Sapphire 2 is going to do, it does play out, and it does commercial insertion, and on and on and on. So that was really neat. Harmonic was showing their 4K and HEVC, which was very impressive. We like that. And then, what are you on now? You're on Grass Valley. Okay. So, and then yeah, stay there for a second. And then Net Insight. So yeah, conveniently left it on there, TJ. So anyway, so Net Insight, they were showing their, I don't know if you guys are familiar with their VA 210s and the 220s. The 210s is a over-the-internet ARQ system, that goes over the internet. And it's really cool. Airport Network is using it, so Chris here and John Truitt's here, but you can talk to them about that. But anyways, what's neat about it is that, we talked about Fujitsu before doing ARQ over the internet, right, with deep packet recovery. Rick, of course, did the presentation on the with the writer and everything using Zixi. But anyways, Net Insight can do 32 separate channels on one box. You can send out, you could be transmitting to 32 locations over the internet using deep packet recovery. That was pretty cool. And the new one has an encoder built in. So now they're kind of like LTN and several companies now that do deep packet recovery systems over the internet. They're adding their encoders into it. Ericsson, I was talking to Luann earlier. If you have any more questions, you could talk to her. But they were doing a satellite truck uplink with 4K at 25 megabits, HEVC. Okay. And with DVB S2X, and it was being downlinked in the Intelsat booth over a 9 megahertz, right, Luann? A 9 megahertz slice on the transponder, and they were showing it on an 85-inch monitor. Go on to the next pitch. Oh, I'm sorry, that was Grass Valley. So Grass Valley, they were showing their 4K multi-viewer. This was really cool because Rick and I have been asking vendors for what, Rick, 3 years, I think, for 4K multi-viewing, and so we're finally starting to see it. Snell and Wilcox, they had a router that had LEDs on the B and Cs that would light up. I got to talk about Grass Valley one more second, by the way. They had their IP router I was talking about earlier. Their new low-cost 230-inch camera, by the way, that was $45,000 for the whole chain. That was really neat and impressive. And then their 4K multi-viewer we talked about. And then go to the next picture. So this was Artel. Oh, what happened? Anyways, but they acquired Communication Specialties. Phil Dubs is here if you have any questions. But anyways, this company makes a ton of small fiber converters, like everything to everything over fiber. Anyway, so this was a handheld fiber meter that was really neat, very low cost, and a lot of little tiny gadgets just to go between two different destinations. Also, the next picture you'll see they have a 1 rack unit box for doing fiber stuff they were showing. And then the next picture, I think, is there one more? Oh no, the next picture they have. But anyways, the next one is they were doing, they have an L-band card now. This is amazing, but L-band that will analyze, you put in the frequency, it'll find out everything, symbol rate, FEC, everything automatically. And, ready for this? It will scan the whole 500 megahertz of a satellite signal, L-band coming in, and give you a printout of every single digital carrier and what it's doing, which is really neat. So anyway, so that's coming. We're going to. They're showing another vendor, another company soon, and we're going to get our hands on one as soon as possible. So you can talk to Phil about that. Drone, real quick. They actually had an area for people to do drone presentations, and that's what this was. The next slide, this was the back of the South Upper Hall. The next slide, oops, and look at the size of that drone. Can you believe that? Anyway, so they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Next slide is, I got to talk about, this is the Decimator. You've heard me talk about it before. They had a 16-way multi-viewer, which is only $800, and if you want to do audio meters and UMD and everything, it's $1,400. It was really neat. And then of course they have their up-down cross converters, only $300. Real quick, Ikegami, this is a new 3rd-inch camera, full HD with everything over fiber with CCU and a little tiny. You got to go to the next slide and see the little controller. It's so cute. Anyways, but this is the little OCP shader controller. It's really little. Anyways, and it's $25,000 for the whole chain. I think that's a great option for churches. Anyways, the next one is it says Stagebox was there showing their HD everything, and then I'm going to get to this in a second. Matrox had their new Monarch with the 2-channel encoder. Ross had their new carbonite switcher, by the way, the black. It's a 3ME switcher. What this is really neat. This is called Legislator. And what it is basically they have these robotic cameras in these legislation areas, right, in these different states around the country. And I don't know if you can see this or not, guys, but basically they take a picture of every single person and they put their heads on the tables where they sit. And the robotic cameras are programmed for every single speaker, okay? And whenever anybody talks, they hit a button, like they're going to speak next. Say it was TJ. I'd hit the TJ button. It will then send the robotic camera to get the tight shot of TJ, focus everything. It will load the lower third for TJ's name, okay, what his position is. It'll preview the camera on the switcher automatically, and it'll preview the lower third. And when I hit take, it puts it on the air. And then if he's done and I hit the next button, it goes back to a wide shot. It knows you need a cutaway shot, goes to a cutaway shot. Dick Talbert starts talking, boom, next camera goes to Dick, loads his lower third and puts it up. Very impressive. That was kind of cool. And, of course, all their open gear stuff they were showing. Vitech was showing their HEVC encoder. I mentioned that earlier. And they have a new delay server product, by the way, for churches. You know how they have to delay the service, so that was kind of cool. And then Media Proxy was a really cool logging system I looked at. Eris had their new transcoder. So where are you at now? Okay, this is Eris. So what I'm going to show here is, go to the next slide real quick. Okay, go. And, okay, go back. So Eris had their new encoder and their new receiver, which was really impressive. By the way, you're seeing a lot more encoding in a box. So they could do literally 24 HDs in one RU. 24 HDs plus, you ready for this? Plus 8 profiles for every single channel. And Luann's over there saying what Ericsson does, I know. But anyways, So I know. So anyways, well, you know what they're doing? There's only so many BNCs on the back, and they're actually going to IP. So actually, you have to get the extra channels, you're going on the IP port. But anyways, that was cool. Now this you got to hear about. This is a reality. What Rick, they called it augmented something. But anyways, this was really cool. And I talked about this before, but basically what it is they're monitoring a whole bunch of networks at once. They're monitoring every single thing, everything's said. You can search by any word, come up with anything automatically. Now they're doing moods. So now they're logging whether you're happy, sad, angry, whatever it is, they're logging it. And so literally we typed in angry, right? We typed in a movie, and it showed every scene. You could click on any scene in the movie where the guy was angry. Anyway, so they're doing moods now in this system. It was really neat. So
Is that like that Obama guy said?
yeah. So okay, I got to hurry up. So this was really neat. You should see it. It's really cool. They've been doing this, by the way, in Chicago, Rick, right, with 30 networks for how many, 2 years now? They have so much data captured, it's ridiculous. But anyways. Okay, I got to hurry up. So Cisco was showing their new IRD. That's the next slide. That's the 9800, very powerful. The next slide, AJ was showing their new 4K camera. There's a beautiful blonde there. But anyways, so they're showing a 4K camera that's out and everything. And also one other thing, you all know about the KeyPro, right? The ProRes recorder. The rack mount one, just so you know, now rolls over from drive to drive. That's something they didn't do that Blackmagic did. So that was kind of cool. Blackmagic, I got to talk about a couple of their products. Anyways, this was the new little converters by Teranex. And one thing is cool is you get a front panel on it, and it has an LCD monitor for only $85 more, and it has a setup menu. That was kind of interesting. Although several of the converters were analog, a lot of them were analog in and out, and I'm like, who deals with analog anymore? But anyways, Teranex also has their new Teranex Express, and it was $1,300 for the new Teranex Express. This is a new little monitor that's 5 inches, that's a recorder. The thing about it is it records on SD cards. I'm not happy with that. Anyways, because you're going to pay $100 for a little card, and it's only going to record an hour, and you're going to lose it. But anyways, compared to everybody else uses hard drives. And then they have a mini converter that's super 16 millimeter, So no, this is the SD, the 128. It has to have a fast speed too. Yeah, it's 128 gigs, so that's a lot of money. Anyways, the 16 millimeter sensor MFT lens camera. Oh, one more thing really by the quick. Very interesting is they have a 12 by 12 router, a TEM. Just switch through the slides real quick. This is a TEM showing HDR. And then you had leader. This was really cool. The LED screens, by the way, 1.2 millimeter pitch, 1.2 millimeter. Media Links was showing their J2K and all their fiber hitless switching stuff. And then Intopix, I got to talk about this last thing, is they were showing the TECO system. TECO is 4K over 3G, and a lot of companies have signed up with part of what they call the Alliance. Artel is part of the Alliance group, so if you want to talk to Phil about that, you can. And then, Grass Valley, yeah. a bunch of companies are. This is really neat stuff. And then last thing, this is the Ambronics J2K decoder. So this SFP is a J2K decoder, okay, that outputs HDSDI. And then the last thing is there any more slides? The mini, Marshall had their new little, of course, mini 3rd-inch camera, which is amazing with BNCs on the back for only $400. And then you go to the next slide. And then 4A, by the way, 4A, that's the last one, right? So 4A had their new 2ME switcher with 6 extra mini ME, like called light MEs. So it's an 8 ME switcher, which was really, really impressive. And then Sony had their new 4K OLED monitor. You guys, have you seen the OLED monitors they sell, which was $24,000. But anyways, it was very impressive. And then they had a full 4K, they had a 4K remote truck in the booth on the floor. Camera, switcher, graphics, everything doing 4K. That's it.
Thank you. 30 seconds. By the way, Bob, you mentioned so many companies. I realize I have been very remiss about something. Tonight's dinner, our sponsors, Grass Valley Development Company, TE, George, you're over there, Osborne Engineering, and CTG. So I want to say thank you to these 4 companies who have spent money to give you their I also want to mention that Canon has loaned us for our meetings a nice camera. Oh, you're going to have to reload that. Sorry. The camera, that's not the camera's fault. That's our software. We are trying to work to get this running, but they loaned us a nice camera so that for our meetings, as we stream it, just kill the software. We literally got the software to do this somewhere around noon today, so we're working hard on it. Kill that? Kill it again. Kill both windows. So want to thank Canon for the loan of this. Kill that window. We find that we're pushing this.
They've been elected Windows 10.
Let's go. So, Bob, you mentioned a whole bunch of things. I'm working to get the camera back up. You mentioned a whole bunch of companies. One of the things I'm curious about, I heard that HDR was a big thing. Certainly drones were a big thing. So, Steve, I'm going to put it to you. At the show, what were every show seems to have its own theme. 3D was a year or two ago, 4K last year. What did you see?
Yeah, I was going to say actually though that 4K still seemed to be the big push this year. The one thing that was interesting to me though is for anybody who saw the Imagine's Future Television panel, you've got guys over there from Comcast, Disney, Microsoft, and DirecTV. So they kind of went through their presentation of where they thought television was going, and then at the end they did kind of a straw poll, and they asked a whole bunch of them, it's like, how many are you planning in your networks to migrate to video over IP? It was pretty much unanimous in the next 5 years to a decade maximum, but they all thought within 5 years they'd have serious deployments in video over IP. They asked in that same group, how many of you will be doing 4K, and nobody raised their hand. Yeah. Having said that, yeah, well, it could be, but they followed that up with the how about 8K, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders, didn't raise their hand again. So I do think that based on a trip I made out to the HPA conference in January, that high dynamic range really is, I think, the next frontier for the broadcaster. I don't know if anybody else saw the demonstration of Dolby Vision at the NAB. Dolby Vision is a system that's designed to help content creators process their images and store metadata into a system that will then provide the best possible dynamic range experience for the television it's being broadcast on. So a way for the content creator to kind of map through the look that they want into something that won't be necessarily automatically corrected by the display unit, which is a lot of the problem that, especially in the conference I went to in January, the content creators were complaining about. So high dynamic range seems to be the next frontier for us. Bob mentioned too the the IP video SMPTE 2022, everybody was showing the software-defined network or their version of it. I was going to mention the TICO compression too, because 4K over 3G, friends, that's how it's being done. They pushed really hard on that being low latency. TICO being available in the ASIC now, not only in software deployments, and that it was a compression that where all the loss you're going to take, and it's supposed to be a 4-to-1 visually lossless setup. All of the loss you'll take is in that first generation. If you then run it through the system, multiple times after that, you don't continue to degrade, which is something unusual about the TICO compression. Product. Something else that I saw that I thought was interesting, CTG has a bit of a focus on sports these days, was a company called Ion Sport. Is an Australian company, and they're doing a lot of work right now in cricket, but it was their prediction of what's going to happen as more of the sporting technology moves into the Internet of Things, which I'm sure is a concept that people have all heard about. They were showing a smart stadium concept, and they were showing a particular product called a smart bat, which they're going to use in cricket this season, where they're actually putting accelerometers and sensing technology into the sports piece itself. So the bat had sensors in it, that would tell you, allow you to track, the motion of the bat, the speed of the swing, the angle at where, what point on the bat the ball impacted it, and then they, predict that there will be, further follow-up with biometric sensors on the athlete. There will be sensors loaded into the ball itself, and then combine that with camera feeds and video analytics, so that in the stadium, in the smart stadium, that you have certain of these feeds the broadcasters will get, certain of these feeds that people that subscribe to services will get, but then the trainers themselves and the coaches will get pieces of this data, and all of this is combined into the smart stadium concept. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, they're talking to us now about our refrigerators joining the Internet of Things. How far is this going to go? But obviously in sporting technology, that's something now where, if you can get the technology small enough to where it won't interfere with the sport, but it can give you data beyond, what we've been able to do with simple visual capture and video analytics alone, that really could be, kind of a game changer for the way that sports and broadcasting combine. So I thought that was interesting. Like I said, a lot of those other things, that I saw, the other thing I kind of chuckled at when I went by Sony was that the optical disc archive is back. And it's back in a big way, 12 disc cartridges. We're talking a 300 gig to 1.5 terabyte in a cartridge. And we're still talking about, access speeds back from it that really blows tape away. So, while, for a while it was, you're looking at optical, it kind of went to tape. And in some of these forms, I think we may be seeing some of that come back. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you see anything about TICO on the FPGA?
They talked about FPGA, but it seemed like ASIC was what was available now.
TICO is a very lightweight, very inexpensive 4K 4-to-1 compression, taking 4K down to 3G 1080p type bandwidth. You can put 3 of them on a 10 gig transport. But the main difference with TICO is it's line-based compression, not frame-based, so that it's very lightweight. We use an extremely small FPGA, and Intupix is the originator. They're the designer of the code, and we use the Intupix, one of the competing compression systems for 4K, and it can be loaded on a very inexpensive FPGA, and is very inexpensive.
It's line-based, not frame-based.
Very low latency. Actually, the latency is in the pixels. Latency is measured in pixels. For those streaming, you didn't hear that. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Mark, I know you were looking at RF and the bandwidth and what's happening. People don't really remember that you can actually pick up TV.
That beard is so big.
I brought one picture to compete with Bob.
Definitely needs
Yeah, I
to
mean,
But it's a good one. It's kind of a spoof advertisement my friends at Gates Air did. But it says it all. I said this was my 40th NAB. So I've seen lots of filament transformers and clickety-clack relays. And I operate in the 50 ohm world, which those of you who know what Ohm's law is anymore. Well, that's when Gates Radio was formed in 1922. I thought it was a good zinger up there too. But what's happening in the 50 ohm world of TV broadcast transmitters, I'm just going to focus on that. There's a lot going on the radio side as well. But the big show out there this year, put that picture back up. I want to talk to you just a minute. The big show is the FCC has announced there will be a spectrum auction, voluntary, to tell people to take the money and run. Or if you don't, we're going to repack you down below channel 35 and sell off what's being called the 600 megahertz auction. And they're thinking $30 to $40 billion, although that's being challenged. It's all over the place with him and Hahn on both the finance side and on the technical side of what's going to happen. But the kickoff meeting in the middle of the show was Tom Wheeler, the chairman of the FCC, talking to the broadcasters, and I thought maybe they're going to a couple of shoes flying during that conference. He's not broadcast friendly at all. This thing will happen. The big stations probably won't be affected, but up to half of them probably will. If they're not taking their money and running or channel sharing, they're going to be repacked below channel 35. So all of the broadcast transmitter and antenna people are salivating, as are the attorneys and consultants. And I'm now with Osborne Engineering, which is a consulting firm out of Ohio, and we're launching into the repack business.
So you have mixed feelings. You hate to see it go, but salivating for the business.
Well, I hope it lasts as long as I do, so I can enjoy it. And this one picture kind of says it all. There's been a technical analysis done for the FCC, a study called the Widelity Report that talks about the technical cost of doing this. And case study number 4 is the most complicated granddaddy of them all, and you're looking at it there. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that Golden Gate Bridge and fog on the bay, but that's Mount Sutro Tower, which is now 40 years old, and there are 12 TV stations on it. And one used to be a Cox, it's a Fox now, KTVU. But the big question for them and people like American Tower with 2 candelabras here in town is who's going to go away? Who's going to be your tenants? It's kind of like a big shopping center. What's going to happen? And can you survive it in the long run, or is it time for that whole we got to put a transmitter on the air and radiate as in days of old to keep going? So that's why I showed that. And also just a little bit of parody. The big talk, which nobody really keyed into much, was internet cloud playout and storage and editing and everything. Well, to a 50 ohm transmitter company, I don't want to pitch the old Harris Corporation, now Gates Air, but this is what being in the cloud means. So I really enjoyed it. We're out there picking up some clients to do some studies. And to rearrange things, and that's part of the big Widelity report is getting consultants on board to help you. There's also a finance report called the Greenhill Report, which is by a hedge fund Beltway Bandit company, and they're going around the country cheerleading for the FCC to say take the money and run. There's a lot. This is a last in the opportunity. It's kind of like the highway department putting a new interstate through your farm. You want to take the money and run, that sort of thing. Makes sense to some people and not to others. So that's what I'm all excited about.
So we see HDR, we see drones, we see lots of stuff that seems going on with IP-based, fighting for our frequencies. Okay, what did you see? What do you think is out there?
I saw a lot of technology from last year moving more down into the, like Mike's going in. Moving into more of the consumer space or prosumer space. It means a lot of business models are moving down to more affordable options. So same technology, but at a much cheaper price point. I have a PowerPoint
We're finding the challenge of switching between the camera and the PowerPoint and.
See how easy it is to work with IT?
No, wrong one.
Nice switcher.
Was that yours, Scott?
I'm sorry, what's your name again? Nick?
Should be in.
NAV 2015.
It could, there might be, get rid of that. Don't know where we put it. We may have put it, so, sorry.
Just plug the thumb drive in there.
The green one?
Right now, I'm afraid what might happen. Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine.
I'll click through it.
Use some of Bob's.
I was trying to give you a good microphone. He took the good one.
No, it wasn't pictures.
Who was the picture of? Presentation?
Yeah.
This is the back. This is the good one. Whose picture is this? It's a nice picture. Was that, Scott, was that from you? Yeah, we may have, I'm sorry if we missed it. Sorry. So,
Yeah, Blackmagic came out with a lot. They have a lot. Drones were the big thing, so they had their little cameras basically down to, you almost just see the lens. There's not even a camera on it. So they have the micro cameras. They got a cinema camera and a live production camera. So the live production one has a 4K sensor on it, 2/3 I believe. But I think it's the same sensor they had in the Ursa camera. And then the micro cinema camera is pretty much just the pocket cinema camera they had before put down into the tiny size. And you can pretty much get open source connections for the drone, so you can map the channels to any kind of control that you want.
you know, one of the biggest things we've seen with the drone, drone's been mentioned a number of times, especially in a big area, is FAA and the hassles of getting it through the FAA and trying to get the legislation. Was that addressed with anybody in the drone booths?
I know that they were talking about it. I know at HBA they did a demonstration on it. But yeah, it's lots of technology, but no one can fly it.
I know that one of the big things out was Amazon is still pushing to deliver their products via drone, which has been called skeet shooting with targets, with prizes. But but they said they can't test the ones because the only thing the FAA approved was old technology. They can't get the current technology approved. So interesting. Anything else?
Yeah.
And we're trying to get your pictures up, by the way.
Yeah, one of the things also is for live production as well as more like cinema camera type production, things are moving together where you can basically have one camera that you can rig for either a normal commercial type use or for live production. So with the Panasonic VariCam or the Sony FP5, you can pretty much go out over fiber if you want, or you can you don't have to buy specific use cameras for either, but it also
F5. Hold on, I think we're just about there. Drag the whole. Okay, now, where was it? It was over here.
Did you catch the drone that was flying the LED light panels around? They did have a set of drones where actually, since we have these cameras going all over the place, it was actually somebody showing the illumination panels on a set of drones, so you could fly the camera and then fly the lighting along with it. Lighting for the camera. So you could light it, since hard to rig lights, hard to have a grip where the drone goes. The idea was that you could fly the lighting panels. Yeah. Yeah. Actually was LED panels flying under a drone.
Nick, we finally got your PowerPoint up. Yeah. Yeah, it may be the only thing we show from now on, but go ahead.
Yeah, so Adobe, they announced their next version, which pretty much is all about color and color correction. So what they basically did was, using the speed grade engine, they put all the Lightroom controls into Premiere and kind of gave it a one-tool kind of room type approach. So the top, I don't think you can see it there, but you basically have, like, rather than going up and changing your workspace, you have like a color room, effects room, edit room. But they actually have it now, so it's a LUT-based color, I guess, backend for the whole system. You can actually have a app on your phone, and you take a picture of a photo, and you take a picture of anything, and it will actually create a 3D histogram with basically it looks like little 3D bubbles all around of the different colors, and they're raised up and down based on luminance. And then you control the intensity of any of those points, and it creates a look you can apply in any of the other programs.
Sounds like a new user interface. Feedback, do people think it's going to be very helpful for editors?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people are using Lightroom for their photos, so it's the identical controls. So it's more consumer oriented than professional oriented. So I mean, I personally would have thought speed grade controls in Premiere would be more helpful, but it's definitely angling that more towards the consumer, which in some ways, like with their Adobe Anywhere platform, they moved to a new model without streaming. I think it's partially based on these features, which they couldn't really implement in a cloud-based approach.
Okay. More oh, I know to see there's more slides.
Yeah, so Avid came out with basically 3 versions of their software, limited, I think, to like 4 video tracks, and then they also implemented cloud pretty heavily, especially in their Pro Tools suite, where you basically collaborate between multiple people, and it will automatically send back and forth as changes are made for all the other tracks. Right. So Sony, it seems like they've pretty much departed from Vegas, and they've gone to this new Catalyst platform, which I tried to use when I was doing DIT work on a set, and couldn't figure out how it worked. And any of you I went and talked to them, and they said, when you have to upload footage, it goes to the internal hard drive on your laptop. That's how you ingest it, and then that's the only place you can work on it, and then it goes out to another.
So the anti-cloud.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so Resolve 12, basically most of the features are in the editorial. The last version, they added a lot of these great editorial features, but they couldn't really get real-time playback, so that's pretty much been fixed. They showed where you've got, I think they showed 12 multicam angles playing real-time ProRes 422. So that was really impressive. Plus they also have underlying now a color science management system. So kind of like the way that Baselight has their true light color spaces. So it's kind of like an alternative to ACES.
You've been talking about a lot of the editors and it sounds like there's some new approaches to how things are done, not just incremental, but different approaches, such as the 3D histogram for the luminance or for the color. Anything stick out in your mind as, wow, this was so neat, what they did?
I really like in the new version of Resolve, which they had in the last version, they refined it some more, where depending on where you put your cursor, it changes the tool. So you're not having to memorize all these shortcuts. You can do everything with the mouse. Just simply, a small difference in where you actually place your mouse on the edges of clips. And then you could also just highlight a bunch of clips and grab the ends and do trimming all at once.
There was a time about 4 years ago where Final Cut Pro, that was it. That's what people used, or that was the market. And Apple, I think, has abandoned it. It sounds like there's a lot of competition out there now.
Yeah, and I think definitely a lot of these other LEs have moved towards that same market that Apple saw as being the primary market, but not forgetting the broadcasters. So just Fusion 7, Blackmagic Design recently bought Fusion, which is VFX software, so now they're releasing that for Mac, and I'm sure that's kind of what they've been doing, is they buy software, put it on all platforms, and I'm sure the next release will just be a GUI upgrade. So there we've got the micro cinema camera. So there they are again. See how small they are. And I mean that those connections on the, pretty much give you every connection that you want. You can map the channels to control any way you want. So yeah, so now they've got the 4K Ursa Mini. They basically just took the big Ursa camera, put it into a more ergonomic body. But one of the cool things on this that they didn't really promote was that it's got gyros on it. So basically, it'll actually track all the metadata movement. So I'm not sure how they're going to implement that, but probably in Fusion you can do camera stabilization using that data and not get kind of the warp effect they get now with the software data stabilizers. I guess the camera picture didn't come through in that. So yeah, the Barricam, that's what I was talking about with doing live studio as well as cinema capture. And one of the big things they were showing was that they've got two ISOs, 5000 and 800. So it switches basically the native ISO switches. So once you get up to 5000, the noise basically just goes away. And it gives a really nice low light capability.
And that's something we've seen with the move toward the larger format image sensors. There's actually a very interesting video on the web from Canon called, and a very bad name for it, by the way, 80,000 Rats. I know, sorry. It's basically a camera that they were taking, and they had to park at night, and they shift through the ISOs, and they bump it up all the way to 80,000 ISO. And the reason they call it that is when you start bumping it up, you actually see what comes out at night, and it's 80,000 Rats. But very interesting that, and I'm told they actually have a camera that'll do 120,000, but noise starts coming up. But yeah, and anybody, by the way, if you're interested in this at all, just Google it. It'll pop up. Very bad name for a video, but it's amazing because it starts and it's nighttime. You can't see anything, and next thing you know, as they bump up the ISO, it's daytime.
Yeah. And on the Samsung Barricam also, they've got you do live grading via Wi-Fi, so you do live color correction on the camera from a laptop, and the CDLs or LET files are actually attached directly to the files on the camera. You can actually burn in. You can do ProRes, MPEG-4, I think DNX HD as well, and ABC Intra simultaneously, and you can control burn-ins, any kind of burn-in pretty much in color and everything. So basically, it eliminates the need for image processing in the camera.
This looks like one of the bigger drones.
Yeah. So FreeFly, they came out and with their gimbals, and so you pretty much get the same kind of technology for gimbal. What they have is kind of a handheld controller, the Mimic, for their drone. So basically, you have that controller, and you control that as if you're controlling the helicopter. So you've got the monitor on there, so you can actually view it and then control the angle and everything from that.
Question from back there. Hold on, let me get you the microphone.
Betray my earlier career. Go back one picture. So putting that payload high up would normally make it unstable, but I guess obviously they did this so they can look up. Is that a new thing, that to have cameras mounted above the rotor so that they can do a look up shot? I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, I don't know.
Actually, I think they're flying it upside down. So. Yeah.
Maybe that's how they got the satellite launches. So yeah, so basically this is just a theme of competitors coming out with the thing, the same technology. So DJI Ronin came out very far under the price of the relay. This year from Kessler, the second shooter is basically just a very portable robot for motion capture. So you control it, you can just set it to motion and we'll repeat it. So you can have a second cameraman without actually having the person there. On the Shogun, the same theme of competitors coming out. Before now, pretty much convergent designs they still have really great, the Odyssey 7Q onboard recorder and monitor, but Atlas came out with all the raw support and a lot of the same features as well, but at a lower price point. And then Red Rock Micro had a really cool system, the Halo system for focusing. So you can see there on the iPad app, those dots are actually people. And they actually have a sensor that goes underneath your camera and actually maps out basically through like radar, sonar, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's able to actually track the distance to people, and automatically on the iPad you can just click the person and it'll focus to them as they move back and forth. And here, Barn 1 from Barn Find. So basically this is a 32 by 32 matrix router, fiber optic router. So you basically put any SFP in there and get anything in, anything out, bidirectional. It's really cool because you can do basically up to 9 cameras over a single fiber connection, and then you rent like a dark fiber connection, like in a sports arena, and go out to a remote facility and have the CCUs of the remote facility, all controls, shading, everything there. So you actually have to have a satellite.
Single mode fiber? Single mode?
Yeah.
Is something else?
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you. So we talked about HDR, we talked about RF, we talked about drones. Of course, we haven't heard anything yet, have we, Mike? So talk to us a little bit about audio.
Audio. Audio is great. I'm going to just go to one thing, well, two things really quick. Pro Sound Effects introduced Amsonic sound effects, and for anybody who knows what Amsonics, basically they record a multi-channel sound image with this particular microphone that has all the capsules kind of in the same place, like your little Zoom recorder. It's called coincident pairing, but instead of just a pair, they've got these capsules in multiple directions, and it records this sort of matrix sound file that can then be decompressed into all kinds of surround formats, and that's really cool. But the thing that I want to talk about is immersive sound. I went to a great seminar about immersive sound. Like if anybody's gone to see a movie in the theaters in Atmos, for example, there's one theater here in Atlantic Station that has it. Here's a picture of a movie theater with speakers on top, and basically what they're showing you is 7.1 surround plus speakers on top, which is really kind of nice, and they're really pushing that for the home market as well, video gamers, home theater, that sort of thing. And I think the push is going to go through. It's not like 3D television. This is real. And I went to this great seminar on immersive sound it was kind of more for broadcasters than it was for creatives, but there was just enough balance to keep me interested through the whole thing. But what they were talking about is how, of course, Atmos is not the only technology out there. There's Aura 3D, which is pretty big. DTS has theirs, which is DTS-X, and then they sort of allowed for a fourth one to show up in the next 12 months. And what they're pushing for, and I think what SMPTE is pushing for, if I'm not mistaken, is to create a box of some sort that would take a bit stream and essentially give you any and all platforms on a single bit stream, so that it could be encoded and decoded on each end. That's all broadcast terminology.
To clarify that, there are manufacturers reps within SMPTE that are pushing for that unified standard. There are other manufacturers reps within SMPTE who don't necessarily like that idea.
And so for me, I focused on the creative part of it. I got my hands on the Dolby Atmos Panner. Avid announced Pro Tools integration with the Dolby Atmos Panner. I wanted to make sure to get my hands on that while I was out there. That was pretty awesome. And then I went to the Atmos demo in the Dolby booth and got a real feel for how it is implemented in
Question for you, with UHD TV, with the 4K and even 8K that NHK was, they were talking about a 22.2 sound. How's that, is that kind of dying away, or?
I can't really address that. I don't know.
Okay.
Just to clarify, what this is, and the others like it, this is object-oriented. So it's not actually any firm number of sounds. You're actually panning between them. And so you're putting an X, Y, and Z coordinate for where you want the sound to come from. And then, you can have 10 different theaters that the speakers are laid out different, or 10 different homes because of the physical room. And you align it so it's, in some ways, there's a perception of maybe you might call it infinite numbers of channels of sounds. So you no longer have firm speakers to give you firm sound location. It's using a holography sort of methodology, to use somebody's patented term.
So the third slide. So this is really technology allows you to position the sound versus having a specific number of channels.
So if you look at this right here, and one of the panelists in the seminar was a guy from Skywalker Sound who actually has done multitudes of Atmos mixes. He's kind of one of the few who have actually done them. And what he said is they build a 7.1 mix, and then they take a select number, which could be up to 128 different objects, that they then steer around the room. And so what you end up with is you build your bass mix, you put your music and your ambiences wherever you want, and then you just sort of take everything else in your mix, which can be multitudes of channels, and just steer them with metadata, essentially. And it turns into a bid stream, which then gets decoded on the other end.
So if I could just add to your explanation from a home theater, because I'm building an Atmos theater at home.
We're coming to visit, by the way.
Okay. Be ready in October. The object-oriented surround sound, as we're now talking about it, immersive audio. From a home theater standpoint, you don't need 200 channels. They have been doing, and I've heard it, they've done tests with standard either 5.1 or 7.1 using 2 or 4 speakers in the ceiling. And they've actually gone one step beyond that because people may be reluctant to start poking holes in their ceiling, is they have found that they could use reflected audio from on top of a speaker system that'll reflect off the ceiling. And they have shown that the 2 system, the 2 audio from the ceiling, works just as well as the 4 from a home theater standpoint, and is a lot less expensive, and you don't have to drill holes. You just put the speakers really high and reflect it. From a personal experience, when I heard Atmos, the thing that got me was they said, one of the things that most people argue about over home theater is narrative sound. And they said that they take that narrative sound and they make an object out of it. And no matter where it is in the theater, whether it's the right, the left, the back, that one object, the narrative sound, can be boosted up by 3 or 6 dB. So for some of us older guys that have some deterioration of their bandwidth, so to speak, we can boost the audio of just the narrative sound by 3 or 6 dB, and no matter where it is in the room, it's forefront, and you don't have to turn the whole system up to get the narrative sound. Thank you.
And I demoed, like Genelec had an Atmos setup in their booth, which I had some issues with, but part of it might have been program dependent, so I certainly didn't bring them up with the Genelec people. But when I went to Dolby, I spoke to them about it a little bit. But then in the Dolby demo, they played both. They played with the speakers mounted above you, as well as the upward firing speakers. And I really liked, for home theater, I liked the upward firing speakers maybe even better, not just because you don't have to hack into your ceiling, but because it just seemed a little more, like the other ones, if your ceiling is too close, then your speakers are too close, and it was like, there's something right there, whereas the other one was a little more immersive, which I think is the whole point.
When you get that done, we'll publish your address and on the website and have everyone come by and visit.
And are you putting the immersive video screen in along with the Atmos? 132-inch diagonal, 80? That's pretty good.
Okay, so I'm sorry, and I don't want to cut you short. Is there?
No, I mean, that's about it. I just want to, for anybody else who's considering this, that question was so relevant about screen size, because at the Genelec booth, they had speakers all around you, and then they had this TV that probably wasn't bigger than 40 inches, and it was 10 feet away. And I'm like, this is really unbalanced, So, I mean, if you're going to do something like that.
It's like my kids saying they're watching HD when they look at the iPhone. No, you're not.
We're seeing some pixels.
One of the few things my wife agreed about, bigger is better.
Bigger is better. Screens.
Well, they're saying it's all about the 60 arc seconds of the visual system. And if you can make everything that you can see within the 60 arc seconds, that's supposed to trigger reality in the brain. So the immersive sound, the immersive vision, have to play together to get the entire experience.
Okay, so we hear about the technology, and this is great stuff, and as an engineer, I'm so excited about everything. Now, John, your operations, and you've heard all these wonderful things, and you're going to tell us really what we're going to really be buying, because we need to buy things that solves your problem and does things for you.
I don't have enough money to solve my problem.
We'll stick with technology.
Okay. So, TJ, I have about 250 pictures. Can you call them up? They're all 4K. Yeah. So, Sarah, I do have so we'll start here. So, my two things, and you to NAB, and there's 1,000 things, right? One of my two biggest things this year was the Sony panel. We have a pretty good partnership CNN does with Sony. It's a new 8,000. Well, it's actually a 7,000. They went backwards with the name for some strange reason from 10 years ago. You'll enjoy this. And just called it 7,000, but it was 8. Whatever. This is the 7,000 panel. It's what's that? Not so much, yeah. It basically allows us with editorial to provide a better visual screen of 32 boxes on the ear. If you've every keyer can do a DME, if you will, called actually resizer. One of the biggest reasons we're buying these. The other thing is it leads us up to IP, which everybody knows it's going to happen well before even 4K. The biggest thing for us is a partnership with Sony. We went on a lot of meetings with them regarding the features on this panel. We've been working with them for about a year with our operators in DC, Atlanta, and New York with what we wanted to see on a new panel. We're actually installing this in Atlanta middle June, and DC is sometime in July. So that was a big deal. The next thing for me is there's not a video of this, actually I think there is. Yeah, but I
know we're having some problems getting the videos.
That's all right. If you can't get it, that's fine. So there's something called MDM that we worked heavy with Sony. It's kind of crazy. We have these $500,000 switchers, and in order for me to put effects from 30 feet away, no, it's not that one. It's one with this like a GUI screen. I have to take a USB stick and I got to walk it to the other switcher and I got to plug it in and I got to load it. It's just kind of crazy where we are in the world today that we have to do stuff like that. So we started partnering with Sony about 6 months ago to do this thing called MDM, which is data. Basically, it's an old data manager that takes frame memories, effects, snapshots, anything on the switcher, and does it across a network, a global network. So we have switchers in London, New York, and DC. No. You're almost there. And it basically is going to allow us to share effects, share animations, basically share data across multiple cities. A big deal for us? No. It's a big deal. It's really not 250, I swear to God. It basically is a big deal for us to partner with them and do it. That's the one. You can just bring it forward and just play it. It's fine. It's kind of hard to see. So we saw this for the first time in NAB. It was kind of exciting. We've been working with Sony, who obviously has a big plant in Japan and developers. And basically, this is a really fundamental, very basic. It's going to look much different than this when we give Sony true feedback, where we will. But basically, the left side is one switcher panel with all the effects, and the right side is another one. And then you can basically take it and you can drag like that effects over from one place to the other. That could be the DC switcher could be on the left, and the London switcher could be on the right, or vice versa, however you kind of want to do it. So it's pretty cool. It's amazing we don't have stuff like this now. If you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, right?
I'm having trouble imagining the fact of where we are right now, where 100 meg gigabit, we would need 10 gigabit. No, you'll get your sneakers and you'll put the flash drive in, you walk over.
Sneaker net, right? Yeah. It is amazing, and we've been talking for years with this, with Sony and other vendors, and now we're kind of the good thing is we're on the ground and we're partnering with them, and we're actually going to give them feedback and develop this in the year. It's a real product. It was at NAB. It was very basically there. It wasn't really doing much, but that's the biggest thing. And the other thing is obviously IP. Everybody's been talking about IP. We're building a New York facility, Hudson Yards, in like 4 years. We're moving everything. Everybody knows that. That's going to be probably a very heavy-based IP facility. And everybody's got something coming out. But how do we get Sony? As a head of kind of the operations, how do I? We're buying a new audio board, we're buying a new switcher, and engineering's getting into this router base, right? But as somebody mentioned, how come the router is a different language than the switcher and then the audio board and something else? So as me, it has to be an easy flow, and it has to actually give my operators more flexibility instead of, a brick wall.
Do you need that?
Not for this discussion. So that's the one of the biggest things was IP.
Let me ask you, because I think you hit on something important. You have switchers who don't necessarily talk to each other, and switchers that don't necessarily talk to the camera. You have all these various aspects. Is integration and making them sure they can all talk to each other and do what you need, is that important, and is that lacking?
You mean with switchers talking to each other, or just cameras?
I don't mean just switchers, but switchers and the routers and...
Yeah, it is a big deal. The quicker, I think, something to learn, and then I think the engineers, the CNN Best, that whole department I work with now is just fantastic at that, is really providing a solution for something and then telling us, can it work? Does this work? Does it allow your workflow to be better? And it's not about less people or anything like that. It's about workflow. I deal in a crazy, ridiculous breaking news world right now. Half of Baltimore is tonight is being basically blown up and destroyed, right? Because of the news that's going on there. So that world has to be quick, fast, dirty, and not slow. So,
but you also have challenges that many people don't have, and that is that you have to take studios and control rooms in New York and tie them to the ones in Atlanta, to D.C., to L.A., to Hong Kong, to everywhere, and get them all to talk to each other.
Yeah, and that's we've been doing that for years, and there's no doubt that solutions comes with an engineering group who we partner with, and we explain to them, here's what we want to do. The producer of the Atlanta show is now moving to London, and they have to communicate, and they have to see all the sources that's in Atlanta with the Evert's MVP wall and everything, and we do that now. We just started that 3 weeks ago for the weekend CNN shows.
Yeah, the irony is that as the move to IP is going to actually complicate that.
Yeah.
A lot.
So the workflows we're having in place now, IP can't, and it has to continue. Right. IP can't slow it down, or there's a transition, which is always going to be tough.
You talk about this control system. I think the software-defined networks in the future are really going to be melded in with the control systems for routing and for production switchers, et cetera, as we move more and more towards this IP domain, IP world.
And I think you hit on something, and I was part of CNN. One of the things that they do very well, and I think should be a model for everybody, is that the operations has to work hand in hand with the engineering, because you've just got to work together. You can't be different islands.
No, and I think we do a really, really good job at that now. And in the past, no, we haven't. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, that we just today we're deciding what we can do the rest of this year, because Scott will probably talk to. Master Control has taken up half of my resources for engineering from July on, which is rightly so, because that's our paycheck. So yeah, we have to. So things that we're doing crazy projects right now with 2 studios, and they have to end by July. If they don't, his stuff doesn't start, and we don't get paid.
No. If they don't get done, because his stuff will start. He told me that.
You know that. Yeah, he'll be doing it himself, basically. One more quick thing, you can go through some of the videos, TJ. There's one thing we looked at was LED walls. I think Bob kind of hinted on it. We went there's a couple videos in Atlanta and in New York. Actually in New York and in DC. There's these Christie projectors, right? We've had them for years. I think some 10 years maybe. 2 years ago at CNNI in London, Atlanta, we bought LED walls with Nanolumens, which is a vendor right down the street.
Yeah, in Norcross.
Yeah, Gwinnett Norcross, yeah. But they weren't really ready because it's still moirade. So we did this acrylic kind of screen in front of it and made it a little soft, but it was good for the product that CNNI had. For election night for CNN in DC next November, that's not good enough, right? So we're pushing the vendors. We picked a couple that we're going to bring to Atlanta in about a month and a half to do some demos. We saw a 1.2 wall, 1.2 pitch, which was just truly, there's a video if you can get up, it's the car, it's the red one, TJ, but it's truly amazing, incredible, best video wall I've ever seen. But when you shoot it via a camera, what does it do? It morays. Not as bad as a 1.9. Yeah, that's you can look at that one. That's kind of an older one. It's a 1.9. We noticed that there was a lot of companies, several from China, who were coming out and just saying, yeah, we got an LED wall, boom, go. And you can just tell it wasn't anywhere good. I don't know if you'll be able to tell the video, but there's pretty heavy moray on this. There is right there, right? And the 1.2 did not do it. It was well, I shouldn't say it did do it. It did do it, but it was one of those things. We have to replace monitors in all the studios. There's no more plasmas, right? There's like 3 left in like Kansas City somewhere. Panasonic 80 inches that are, someone keeps telling me, but you're not going to find them anymore, and we're not going to know the LCD with the color and everything is really bad. So this is a big deal, and we're partnering heavily with CNN Best on this because they have to support it, and it has to look good for editorial, and we can't, we got to figure out how we shoot around it as well.
And we know that the LED panels, they started with 6 millimeter, down to 3, 2, and now I haven't seen it yet. I'm hearing the 1.2 millimeter.
There's a red car. There's one that's red, if you can see it. Yeah.
Bob?
And there's a 0.8, I think, next year as well.
I had one thing to mention too on that.
Yeah.
Your company, did you notice it was kind of interesting? When you see LED panels, they're like these 12 by 12 inches, by 12 by 12 squares.
It was
40, and they had these like 50-inch,
45 or something.
Yeah,
50,
45-inch panels. So from the back of it, it looks like a bunch of LCD screens, but it's actually LED. So I thought that was neat, and you don't see the lines. You know what I'm saying? You don't see the splices at all.
Exactly. That's the one.
And Nanolumens does that with their panels. One of the problems is that as you go down in the spacing, your cost just goes through the roof.
1.2 right here. It's truly amazing. The car's pretty nice too, but I mean, the price though from 1.2 to 1.5 to 1.9, I think is like 35% all the way down, up and down, right? I mean, it's that much more expensive. But that's something we're really seriously looking at. That is the next wave of walls. Are going to be all over the place. We're getting rid of the edges, whatever you want to call it. It's just not going to happen anymore. We don't want to see the bezels. Thank you. We don't want to see any bezels anymore. That's from top down. So we're truly going away from the building a wall with 40 monitors and putting it all together, right? That there was about 15 feet by 5 feet tall, 15 feet wide, 5 feet tall. No, absolutely none. And then, the power consumption is incredible, right, for that. All the Christie projectors we do. Plus, you can put this right up against, 18 inches against the wall. So in the studios, we save about 10 feet, which is huge.
Plus your lamp cost.
Yeah, if anybody's got a fixed moray, because we looked at it, and we looked at camera, lenses, we worked with Sony. The acrylic does it. You put something in front of it, it'll... See, I've heard of that. It does it, but it makes it soft, and that's not good enough for CNN election night, so they won't let us use it. But
hopefully, with the going to the 1.2, you can use an acrylic that doesn't soften it nearly as much. Maybe. Okay, so Scott, I hear that you've got a lot of new things coming in July. Somebody let the cat out of the bag. You were there. What did you look at? What did you see that was interesting?
Before I do that, I can't believe you didn't bring the video of the guy telling you his monitor doesn't moray as you're shooting it moraying over his shoulder.
I did not. There was a sales guy who I'm not going to say the company, who was up there and we're like, CNN, yeah, it doesn't moray, and the brochure says that. I mean, it is like, does not moray, the whole thing, and we did it, and we shot it, and he was screaming it does it, and he's like, you're not focusing on me. You have to focus on me, not the wall, and it was just, it almost got to an argument, and it was comical, and we're like, it morays, sorry, buddy, it does.
So what John and Jack have been hinting at in master control for the CNN networks is we got a automation replacement project, which is a really, really big deal for us down the line, probably the biggest project that we've ever handled in master. FloraCal's been our automation vendor forever, and we're definitely going to choose a replacement, although it hasn't been made public who we've chosen yet. The deal hasn't been inked. But that's going to happen, and we have to hit a fourth quarter launch day, which is a lot of pressure considering that we haven't inked the deal yet. And I don't know if you noticed, but it's going to be May by the end of this week. So, so ordering all the equipment, getting it in, that'll be the period where John can actually do his projects until everything gets in and we have to start putting it on the air. So I had sort of a narrow focus when I went to NAB this year. And Woodward, who couldn't be here today, sort of tasked me with seeing if there were any master control switchers left. And the reason I had to do that was right now every other network except for CNN HD, by the way, CNN hasn't gone HD, excuse me. It's the last network that's still in SD. That's the other project that's happening simultaneously with automation replacement is we're going to be launching a CNN HD product. We have Harris Icon switchers, I guess Imagine Icon switchers, and all our other networks. And it was going to be the first time in the history of the CNN networks that all of the master controls would be on the same switcher hardware, and just in time for that to happen, they sunset the Harris Icon product. So I had to go to see if there was anything else out there from a hardware standpoint. So I thought, okay, there'll probably be about 15 companies out there making some sort of master control switcher product. No, not even close. Research online led me to somewhere in the vicinity of 8. I got to NAB 4. Actually made a master control switcher. Of the 4 that made them, only 2 had them there. Of the 2 that were there, only 1 actually worked for the purposes that we need. So there you go. That's the future of master control hardware, I guess. There isn't much of one, it seems. Yeah. It's channel in a box solutions, or as I like to call it these days, network in a box solutions, because it's every channel you've got streaming through a multitude of boxes. The only vendor out there who made a switcher we could use was Evertz for master control purposes. Everyone else was either didn't look like they had a future in front of them, or they just simply couldn't do what we needed. I was actually shocked at the number of switchers that only had one external keyer input, which is just not sufficient for what we would need to do. But I did learn a few things, especially as we've been going through this automation replacement work, which is the struggle of getting different systems to speak to and control each other is probably what leads so many people to go to channel in a box solutions, because instead of asking a vendor to write some sort of control interface for your graphics system, they can just control the graphics system that's already inside the box. So there's a lot that's alluring about it. Part of the problem we had with channel in a box is they were 4-in, 4-out boxes for the most part, and that was not going to do it for us either. Because at CNN is a little unique for master control. All the graphics that's integrate through there is designed by the same graphics designers that do all of our control room graphics. So it's all done through Viz, and we have to integrate 2 different Viz engines, one for our bug and ticker, and then another for our pop-ups and promo things that you see come through master control. So that means 4 inputs right there without a backup. You put a backup, that's 6 inputs. Then you need a program and a preset, and now you're at 8. So we're trying to find the balance between, do we think we're going to go with a hardware solution, or do we think we're going to go with a channel in a box for the first time ever for a network feed at CNN? That's never been done, never been considered before. We did find someone who makes an 8-in, 4-out, and that is the minimum of what we would need. So right now we're at the crux of deciding, do we go with channel in a box or do we go with the hardware? The cool thing about the Evertz hardware, I'll say, is that they have built a view interface, which was alluded to earlier in one of the pictures, that works with their virtual interface from their switcher. It's really probably the coolest thing I've ever seen as far as like a touchscreen switcher goes. You actually look at it and you think this is more real than anything I've ever seen before in a hardware stance, because there's the source. You press the source, you hit take. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing from an operations standpoint, particularly as we're bringing people on board who've they've never seen an Excel spreadsheet. They've never seen a standard switcher before. Everything's been a touch screen, and now they're coming into the job market, and we're trying to show them things that they've never even seen before and telling them this is what we're doing at the leading network for hopefully, we think we are, for news technology. So basically, I think what we're going to do is we're going to come to get a big powwow together and decide if we're going to go with hardware or if we're going to go with the channel in a box solution, and maybe even try to find a way to cheat and have our vendor work with Evertz, and maybe they expose their their data so that they can maybe build something like a touchscreen type thing for us, and we can have the best of both worlds. But we'll have to see how that goes.
And I picked up one of the things we mentioned before, which is trying to get the switcher that can talk to this playback device, talk to that graphics, is just a real challenge for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you look at channel in a box and you say, well, that solves all those problems. But it is a box, so everything in one box, even if you're redundant, everything in 2 boxes, eventually something between those boxes have to communicate. it's really, really difficult in the world of master control to get to that point where there isn't a single point of failure. There's always seems to be at least one place where everything gets impacted. The other cool thing that I saw while I was there, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Volacom, but we have it here. We use them for air checks and for compliance. This is only going to be cool to master control nerds like me, but basically Volacom has a way now to take an as run from an automation system and import it into their air checks, and then to create a list that references metadata back to the actual recording via time code and separates each spot, commercial spot and programming spot, and allows you to click on it and takes you right to where that spot started from the as-run display. And then you can do compliance searches off of that. So you can remove all of, let's say, the commercial inventory type and only look at programming if you want to check captioning to see if you were captioning compliant, CALM compliant. It was really, I had never seen that before. I'd never heard them talk about it. And they were kind of, it was awfully casual the way they described it. And I walked around NAB and nobody had anything close to that at all.
So you just mentioned something, CALM compliance, captioning compliance. We know over the past couple of years these have been added in and they've gotten tougher. Has it been a challenge to make sure that you are compliant and to meet the compliance?
I think, speaking for anyone who in this room who has come across a similar challenge, there is probably no greater challenge today in going from a broadcast stream to a digital stream than captioning. Every time you think you've figured something out, you haven't, because it isn't captioned. So right now CNN has all the captioning in the master control path. The only place it exists is downstream from the switcher. And so if you want to get anything upstream from the switcher, because there's things you want to avoid that might be introduced in the master control path, and then put that content on the web, you can't, because anything that airs on the terrestrial television must also air on the web with captioning. So it's been a really big struggle for us.
Usually when things are new, we see the first year, we see some things out and then they refine. Did you see refinements on tools that would let you do this, or have there been any real, oh wow, I wish we had that kind of thing?
I think what everyone is waiting for is sort of automatic captioning, or some sort of program that isn't human driven, that you can run it through a box and say, produce captioning based on the audio that you're picking up, because that solves a lot of the problems. But to a person, everyone I talked to about that said that it's not nearly good enough. In fact, considering some legislation that I've seen that's supposed to come up this year about how accurate captioning has to be based on the signal, it's not going to be close for a very long time.
Yeah, I know that from dictating to my phone and seeing what comes out. Okay, so we've heard a lot of stuff. You've been sitting here. I want to open this up to questions. You've heard a lot of things. Who has a question about what went on and that you may not have heard? And this also extends to the web. If anybody's out there, please type into the chat window and we'll read it and raise the question for you. So,
very simple. Any rumblings of hate to bring up this subject, any rumblings about ATSC 3.0?
Mark?
Yeah, that's probably one hole I left in my presentation, because that's, of course, ATSC is the terrestrial broadcast standard of which DTV stations operate now. It's just simply called ATSC. But ATSC 3 is in candidate status on different layers of it and so forth. There's a big ATSC meeting in Washington next month that's bringing as many people in from the auction and repack as it is just from going ATSC, because now they seem to be possibly joined at the hip, where repacking will allow ATSC 3, but that's just wishful speculation. But they do know that it's going to be very similar to DVB-T2 for terrestrial broadcast television, OFDM type of modulation, which is going to have better throughput than the current 8 VSB. Finally, as I always like to say, Nat Ostroff at Comark was right. We should have gone DVB-T, but there are some transmitter trade-offs there too. But the big thing is they have committed to HEVC codec, MPEG-5. That will be the standard. This is kind of like shooting at a flying target, and everybody knows it's not there yet. But this should allow broadcast television to do a whole bunch of things to rival what's being done on cable and satellite services. So it was a rosy picture painted that maybe it will happen.
even if in a repack scenario or you're channel sharing? How many
That's the
4Ks?
unknown.
That's the unknown.
That's the unknown. Everybody's talking about what ATSC3 can do with 4K and also with mobile services and all sorts of, additional data services and so forth. But nobody's really brought up, and I asked at one of the presentations, what does ATSC3, HEVC, bring to channel sharing? Nobody wants to talk about that. But that may allow 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 TV stations on 1.6 megahertz carrier by the time it's over. They might not all be HD, but you don't legally have to be HD. So there's all sorts of interesting business scenarios there.
Since you brought up HEVC, at the show this year, one of the important things that finally HEVC is real encoders, real decoders, it works. That's the good news. The bad news is we're starting to see the patent trolls show up, and that could really make this ugly. MPEG, it's almost like the consistency between the compression quality and the patent trolls. In MPEG 2 wasn't too bad. MPEG 4, 10 times the compression energy necessary to create it, 10 times the patent trolls. Well, guess what? This is, once again, 10x in terms of the horsepower involved and what's under the hood. It's going to be ugly.
I said that about MPEG 4 too. We'll get over it.
It was ugly.
Yeah. John?
In the back of the red booth, there was gear with Samsung Viewer and Oculus software, and they could plop down this red camera rig that you put it in the middle of a basketball floor, and it shoots the whole floor. And you put on this rig that's like a Samsung Note phone clamped in this viewer that you can buy at Best Buy now. I think gamers are using it. I'm not a gamer, so I really don't know. But you can sit there and you can look back and forth at the ball game and watch the whole ball game. You choose what you look at.
So it's a 1080i porthole into the 4K video.
I just wonder if anybody else saw that, if that's too far down the road, or if that's going to be relegated to over the top, because of the bandwidth, or if anybody here knows of anything down the road for our networks that we're representing here to do that at sporting events especially. They had a basketball game, a soccer game. There was like a pit stop. It was right beside the pit, and the race car comes flying in. The guys are throwing tires everywhere, and you can look over at the tires and you look at the back of the car and filling up gas. And the director at that point has trouble with the job. But.
And we've seen that with live production where they'll take 4K and then they can record it and then play back the porthole to catch the action that they missed the first time.
On the subject of Oculus, I think it was at a VR conference before NAB, but John Carmack, who works for Oculus now, and Facebook bought Oculus, he was talking about how, Oculus had this big head-mounted thing that it's in pilots and beta, it's not product yet, and he said that they are suddenly very rapidly switching to the resources to mobile, where you have a Samsung Galaxy S6 just, clips in, or somehow, I don't know how that interface works, but they were saying, this is coming. We had the first generation last year, as beta, but it's coming like in 6 months.
I know somebody's making the cardboard, take your, whether it's Samsung or whatever, and make it into a 3D where it splits the screen for you.
Google did that. They opened the source.
Dick, I'm coming.
For anybody interested, too, there's also a group called ATL VR, and they get together every two or 3 months. There's a gaming lounge over, I think it's on Roswell Road, maybe north of Perimeter. But anyhow, the feeling in general is that Oculus Rift 2 right now is too low of resolution, which is why they're going to other devices. It's basically 640 by, well, actually it's under 640 by 480 per eye, so it's very easy. I did couple of their experiments too, and it's very noticeable, the pixels, and it's it's immersive, but it's very artificial. You need to have a much higher display, getting back to what Steve McCormick was saying about the 1/60th of an arc. the yard second thing.
Any other questions? Of course, these questions will always come from the opposite end of the room. Yeah, the Fitbit is actually getting very happy with me with
Hey,
this.
TJ, is that Sony 4K truck picture on there that I sent? I just want to put it up because it looks cool.
On here? This is Brendan with the TIM. You asked about the 360 experience, 360 video. There are a number of companies that do this. Immersive sells it as a service. We sell the technology that enables the capture, the stitching, the transcoding, the display, and the apps. And it's, am I allowed to say a sales pitch? It's called LiveSphere. So it's becoming more and more an area of interest. I have some content here on my tablet if somebody wants to see it. But what we're seeing with the broadcasters is that they envision it as a way to enhance the second screen experience. So you can do a capture and process and play it a day later, or you can do a near real-time capture and have it prepared within minutes of the actual event happening.
TJ, anything from the streaming audience?
Get my usual question.
Go ahead.
Oh, to the panel, some new companies were mentioned, but did anybody see a startup or an early stage company that really stood out that you think will be in the industry in the next 10 years?
I think the answer may be no. I'm not sure.
I had a comment on that. I being a 40-year veteran, I remember going into the Central Hall, and it was the big Harris broadcast booth. And that very same position this year was GoPro. And I'll tell you, the screaming, the hollering, and the crowds, I guess they were giving away some of their cameras. It just kind of made you stop and think as to where this is all going. I would guess GoPro is almost a startup, man.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen over the past 10 years or more is that this has gone, and somebody mentioned this earlier, we've gone from, if you did anything, you had to buy the professional camera, the professional whatever. Now it's prosumer. Now we're finding drones and GoPro and so forth, and those components, that level, is producing video that's acceptable to our viewers. John?
So I think on drones, and Bob mentioned, there's probably, I'd say, 15 companies, maybe more, with drones with these big nets, sometimes the size of this room, so the drones don't fly out and cut somebody or something. But I'd be interested to see, like, next year, how many are there, and the year after, and as it really come down to eventually there's 3 or 4 companies of drones, right, and when the FAA kind of, so this is what we're going to do, and this is what you can or cannot do. That to me is going to be the interesting thing. I didn't mention that, but that was the coolest thing.
The only reason I don't think you're going to see too much reduction in the number of drone companies is that for like broadcast is a niche within drones.
Yeah.
So it covers all sorts of industries.
Yeah, point.
I think you'd
Mark?
be, I think you'd be surprised by how much you actually see GoPro footage and real feature films in the theater. In The Hobbit, I don't know if you guys saw in the barrel chase scene going in the water. There was one very noticeable GoPro scene that they had. They attached the GoPro to one of the barrels.
I saw that 6 times.
So to, what happened this year in the back, Garmin really made a lot of noise with their new VIRB XE that's coming out in June. It's going to give GoPro a run for their money. Not only does it do 1080p 60, it does 720p 120. So you get really good quality, and it doesn't take up as much room on the stick, and it's got a bigger stick. There's a lot of enhancements they've got in there the editing software, because it is a Garmin and it is GPS tagged. If you got 3 or 4 people that's got the Garmin on the same route, the editing software you get with it can put it in and put it in time sequence. So you could go from this view to that view, and it would all be in sync. So you've got your own little Avid, Pro Tools that comes with the device, and it's already time stamped because it's all GPS timed. So that little Garmin I think it's going to give GoPro a run for their money. So.
It was interesting you mentioned 120 frame rate, because a lot of the things I see with GoPro, very fast moving, very fast action, and then I get very nauseous trying to follow what's going on. It might be interesting if they could take the 120 frame rate and slow it down, basically do a slow-mo.
Well, they also have on the Blackmagic cameras, the micro cameras, they've got up until you get to 30 frames per second, they have a global shutter. So you're not going to get any of that rolling shutter as well, which is part of the reason why you get nauseous while watching it.
We're getting over there to George.
Regarding new technology, there was a technology area in the North Hall, and there were 3 or 4 neat little things in there, clipping out sports. When you're watching a big screen, you could clip out a sports segment with your phone on an app and then send it to your friends or post it. But all of those people seem to be marketing their companies to Twitter and Facebook, not marketing to the broadcast industry. And then with all the talk of drones, I did see a company that was giving flying lessons. So you could go to all the TV stations. If you were a camera operator, you could go to their classes and get your drone license so that you wouldn't be out of a job when all the cameras were on drones.
So here's the funny thing about that. I know a little bit of what CNN's trying to do with drones, and they did the Selma stuff, right? A few months ago, they had to use a pilot, right? A pilot with a license. You can't just, they basically took another company and said, you know, let's bring you over, and the whole company kind of did that for them. So I think, and underneath me is the studio department, and man, they're all over me trying to say, I need to be drone licensed. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything, right? So they're just trying to figure out. I'm like, you have a pilot license? Can you find? You know, I can't find a plane. Well, then you can't fly you can't fly it above 100 feet or 300 feet, whatever the FAA says, right? So I mean, all that is just in flux now, and it's going to change. And once that does, I think today the earthquake that happened over the weekend. I don't know if you guys saw any of the video with the drones. I mean, they were there in like a day and a half, right? And I just saw this shot today going down this road, and cracks or the buildings will fall. I mean, it allows you to see something like that you've never seen before.
Especially for news, the drones are just have to be an incredible resource once we figure out how to use it, get the drones where they're stabilized to the point, and I know they're coming out better and better where it isn't the pilot who necessarily has to keep it steady. They're doing all that. Pilot and camera operator for those streaming. That's just what I've read about in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, that's only problematic if you're flying it outside, right? That's the only place the FAA has any say. So indoors, you can do whatever you want. And we had a director with us from D.C. who was already talking about wanting to get his hands on one so he could fly it around the convention next year, the Republican Democratic Convention.
I'm sure that'll fly real well with security.
Yeah, I was talking, I'll leave all descriptions of who it was out, but it was an entity that was dealing with drones, and they ran into some problems with not the FAA, but other parts of the government that decided that all the drones had to be treated just like manned aircraft, which meant they couldn't use their drones unless it had proper seat belts, pilot restraints, and you could get out of it in the required amount of time. And it's like, if you can't get into it, you can't get out of it.
You know, one of the drones, the Phantom, is coming out now with, since they have GPS built in, they will have built in the no-fly zones. So the unit, it's already happened, the unit will not, whatever you want to do, and you cannot defeat it. If you go to the White House or someplace and say, I'm going to fly, it will not go there.
I was involved with a drone flight 3 weeks ago out on the water where it hit it knew about a NOTAM, about a no-fly zone, and it landed itself immediately.
You mentioned something back there about the NAB startup section, and I just remembered that I was there around the same time as the editorial executive from HLN, and he spent pretty much his entire time there in that NAB startup portion, just talking to people and companies that were integrating with Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and all of the social media platforms. I think it seems like it's a startup thing at NAB, but it's potentially going to be something pretty big for some of these networks, particularly HLN. That's almost its whole focus.
Were any of these people at CES as well, or probably I would. Here's a what? just in terms of, well, CES has a broader base. And,
Well, you're talking about drone companies?
well, drone or some of the other new tech guys. Are they trying to
Some of
latch
them
on
were
to
at both. Well,
broadcast?
that's it. GoPro obviously is at both in Force. The drones were at CES in Force. Most of the smaller ones, some of the not the larger ones that we saw, but a lot of the same companies were at both CES and NAB. So beyond that, I don't understand. I mean, obviously, companies like Sony, of course, are always at both. But beyond that, most of the people are pretty unique to either the CE industry or the broadcast industry.
Questions? I know, our meetings usually run an hour and 15, and you can always tell the popularity and how people like it when we run over. I'm going to thank everybody because basically we've been here for 2 hours, and I don't think we've exhausted. Yes, I'm too exhausted to remember the word exhausted. I don't think we've exhausted the topic, but I think it's a great thing to hear about. I will plug HDR for SMPTE in August is what we're looking for, right, Dan? That's our last word. We're penciled in. I want to thank the panelists a lot. Appreciate this, a lot of effort, and really we thank you for all your effort.